I'm going to power through some of this. A lot of it is stuff that we have recordings elsewhere. Um, just going to talk a little bit about using the Eclipse Dash license tool. The the Eclipse Dash license tool finds license information for content, but only for content you provided. This is something that I think is hard for people to understand. It doesn't discover anything. It really just tells you what's there. A possible exception is there is an actual Maven plugin, which uses the Maven reactor to figure out what the dependencies are. So it's really still just using using the Maven tool to figure out what the dependencies are. It doesn't have any real intelligence. It doesn't know to go looking for package lock files or go some files or anything along those lines. It doesn't know if your build does something clever and pulls in content from some other some internet site or whatever. It really only knows what you tell it, and again, limited ability to understand things based on existing technologies. It can read a package lock file or a go sum file. It really only understands, again, what it finds there. It doesn't understand, well, it doesn't know how to resolve anything. It doesn't go, it doesn't use the package manager tools or build tools to figure out anything. Like I said earlier, Raul is exploring some tools. We have ORT is something we've been looking at on and off for a long time. Those tools actually do a better job of just discovering things, which are interesting. And again, we're hopeful that we'll be able to make use of them at some point. Um, the Dash tool does not scan your project code unless you tell it to. And well, sorry, we can use IP Lab to do that. That's the other side of the Dash license tool. Again, it doesn't find things. It just does what you tell it. And I've got a couple examples of how it's used. This is an example of using it from Maven. Again, there's a Maven plugin. The Maven plugin uses the Maven infrastructure to figure out what the dependencies are, and it feeds them to the tool, and then the tool uses those to go that information to go and find out what it can with regard to the licensing. Um, you can run a CLI version of the tool and give it a file containing IDs of content. So here's an example of just running it on something on a file called dependencies.txt, and I'll show you a little bit about what that file can look like in a minute. Again, all these examples are elsewhere. I want to just run through them quickly. I can answer questions specifically about them if you would like, but again, I just want to highlight that that this is how the tool can be used, and we will point you to resources to find out more about specific uses. The tool has the ability to request reviews when the tool discovers something that it doesn't understand. When the tool encounters, I gotta be careful, I'm not using the word discover. When the tool encounters content for which it cannot determine an ID, you can tell it to create an issue on our IP lab instance. And you do that by giving it the ID of the project, a token from GitLab, from our GitLab instance for yourself. And then it'll use that information to automatically create issues in our IP lab instance. IP lab is just a GitLab project that has an issue tracker, and we use the issue tracker to capture these requests, review them, and then update our data set, feeding that information back into the tool so that the next time it runs, it will have that information available to it, and the results will be more positive. To request a review, you must be a committer. If you are not a committer on an Eclipse project, our IP lab will just close the issue. It won't look at it. Reason being, we just don't have the bandwidth to review all of the requests that come in from everywhere in the world. We really want to just focus our attention on what committers are asking for. And you must specify a valid project ID. Now, project IDs tend to be two parts: technology top level project. Dash is a sub project. The Dash license tool is actually software developed by the Eclipse Dash project, which is an open source project. It goes through the same release process that your projects do. It does progress reviews. We do intellectual property due diligence for it. It is an Eclipse project. But and it, it's ID technology dot dash, automotive dot OpenPass would be another one. There's a number, the projects tend to have these two-part names. Some of them have three parts. Um, from Maven, there's some new parameters. You do minus dash D parameters. From the CLI, they're just regular command line parameters of that form. IP Lab, like I said, is a GitLab instance, GitLab project that we use to capture information. This is an older screenshot, I guess, but issues are open automatically by the tool. You can actually create your own issues if there's content that the tool doesn't discover or there's some reason why um, you can't use the automation to create an issue. You can just manually create one. There are templates in the repository's issue tracker. Uh, the title needs to be in a particular form. In this case, we're using a clearly defined ID. I think at the time I took this screenshot, we're almost exclusively that. But you can give it a package URL. You can give it the URL for a GitHub pull request, or I think a GitLab merge request. I have to confirm that. It has the ID has to take a form of some identifier, something pointing to a specific bit of software. And again, this is all documented in IP Lab itself. But if you give it that, and then very often from the title, we can intuit the location of the source. If we can't, we may ask for some help. And then there's a way of specifying that. And again, the IP team is quite good at taking you through that. And there's documentation support, and the template walks you through all this as well. Just in another example, some Python dependencies. So this is just an example here of uh, we don't the tool knows nothing about Python. But we can use Python's pip dep tree command to generate a list of dependencies. And so here's what the pip dep tree pardon me. Pip dep tree generates. We can use a little bit of command line bash magic to convert that into a form that the dash license tool understands. In this case, I've converted them to clearly defined IDs. We could convert them to package URLs. Presumably at some point, the development tools for Python will generate package URL formed dependency lists. But anyway, it's this dependency list here. We can pipe that into a file and then pump that to the dash license tool. I think the example I give here is all in one command. Like get the list of dependencies, convert them into a format, sort them, drop out duplicates, and send them to the tool. The dash is read from standard in. Summary dependencies will generate a file called dependencies, which includes a summary of all the license information that it finds for each of the things. In this case, it found a couple of things it didn't know about. Right. So anyway, again, you can just, if we have a technology that we don't we haven't experienced yet, if there's a way of getting a list of dependencies from that development tool, then we have a fighting chance of figuring out how to pipe it into the dash license tool. My preference is that we don't extend the dash license tool to understand all these file formats, but rather leverage the build technology itself to get that information, kind of like what we're doing here. Yeah. So we can give it arbitrary content as well. If you just pump anything into standard out and then read it from standard in, the dash license tool can scan, give you information about one thing. So for this example, we're asking it about this PyPy dependency, and we don't know about this. So this would be an example of something that if we cared about it, we would ask it to create an issue and review it on IP Lab. I'm assuming this is review for most of you. Again, I don't want to be too quick. There are there's been some work to include this into workflows. For example, this is how you might go about including it in a workflow for your Maven-based project on GitHub. A number of projects have also figured out how to do this with other technologies and invoke the tool uh, in an automatic way. This has led to some challenges, and I'll talk about those in a second here. Um, Before I say much else about this, I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that the requirement that we make through our IP policy is that all of the intellectual property reference, third-party content referenced by your project must be vetted for each release. Um, there's no rule that says that you must pass an IP check at all times, right? So just keep that in mind. There's no rule that says you need to be running an IP check every hour or with every pull request or anything along those lines. And I know it's tempting to do so. Um, I'll point out that the tool is just a tool. So one of the reasons why I am concerned about projects running the tool frequently is that I'm concerned it gives us a false sense of security. Please, at any point, if anybody says, but the dash license tool said this was okay, I will look at you sternly. Um, the Dash license tool is not the authority. It is a tool that is designed to help us understand what the licensing is of content, but it doesn't know everything. Right? As a committer, we expect you as the committer to understand how the dependencies are assembled in your project. And if the Dash license tool doesn't isn't able to provide information about something, we expect that you work with the IP team to figure out how we make sure that the dependencies you actually are using are properly vetted. We don't expect you to necessarily figure it out. And in fact, I prefer that you don't try to figure it out in a vacuum. I prefer that you engage with us on an issue, send a note to emo-ip-team at eclipse-foundation.org, or just reach out to EMO or Maria Teresa or me or Raul directly and try to sort this out. Right? Again, please don't get lulled into a false sense of security that everything is okay because the tool is not complaining. Um, One of the things that's happening now is people are running the tool all the time. It's tempting to do this, and I get it. I get that, it's kind of comforting to have another green light in your build. Um, as if we go back, reference back a couple of slides, passing the IP check at any point in history on every pull request or for every commit is actually not a requirement. The requirement is that we pass the IP check prior to making something that, pushing out a release. When you create review requests that are ultimately unnecessary, it adds stress on the system. If you have a pull request, for example, that speculatively includes a library, and then you automatically create a review request for that, and then ultimately decide not to use that library, what's happened is you've added stress to the system, possibly engaged the IP team to do work that ultimately was unnecessary. Right. So I need you to be very sensitive to that. Running the tool all the time and creating issues all the time is not desired. There's other scenarios, right? You're using one version during development and upgrade to a different version before you actually do a release. Again, we're doing work that you don't need. Um, but I do want to be sensitive to the fact that you can't be running the tool the day before your release and expecting to get results. As you are developing, as your dependencies start to settle down and you're starting to get some sense for what things are looking like, that's when ideally you start creating issues to review content that may need extra, may need the review, right? Having doing this, you know, well in advance of your releases, I get it. And there's a push and a pull here. There's no, I can't give you a definitive answer because it really depends on your strategy. If you're releasing every week, then yeah, I guess we have to be doing the vetting right away. If you're releasing every couple of months or every quarter, maybe you can wait till about halfway through the quarter before you start creating issues for us to do reviews, right? That gives us a lot of time to get it done before your release. So again, use some judgment. If you're not sure, just ask, and we can help you sort out when the timing is best. Um, so yeah, the Dash license tool was created as a sort of a CLI Maven-based tool, a tool that was intended for developers to use on their workstations. Use in automation is a great, as I say here, is a great evolution, but it was never really an original design goal, and we didn't really anticipate uh, a problem that we're starting to see. Periodically, while running the tool, some of you have been encountering these HTTP 429 errors from clearly defined. My hypothesis, and I haven't been able to completely validate this, my hypothesis is that enough of you are doing this that's causing a problem. The Dash license tool for the, basically what it does is it um, batches the requests that we make to clearly define into groups of 500 IDs. So for most of our projects, we're calling clearly defined 5 or 6 times. Never really was a priority to figure out how to manage rate limiting on clearly defined because the original use of the tool and the individual use of the tool gets nowhere close to the rate limits. Unless you are doing unless you are running the tool on every pull request and your project is very active and you are running on the same infrastructure as hundreds of other projects, right? So what I think is happening, and again, I haven't been able to independently verify this, is we're seeing these too many request errors because many projects are running many builds that invoke the tool. Um, right? So again, what we're seeing is we see them periodically. And I think it's, it's during periods of, during the periods during the day when development is most active as far as I can tell. Anyway, so in the aggregate, collectively, we're making a lot of calls. Uh, so we're investigating it. I think I have a solution. It may require some additional burden. I think we are all individually going to have to authenticate with clearly defined. So that would be some additional configuration on the tool. I think that will work. I'm trying to clarify with our clearly defined friends whether or not this will actually solve the problem. Anyway, there is an issue open on this. I didn't provide a pointer, but I'll include a pointer in the notes that follow this. Sorry, and of course, one of the solutions to this problem is to stop calling the tool all the time. You may notice uh, in this example that I gave for a GitHub workflow, I'm only calling it on a pull request when the POM file changes. Right. So at very least, I'm only calling this if there's an actual change in the configuration that may change the dependencies. Um, that, probably good enough. Anyway, that should mitigate some of the problem if my hypothesis is correct about the nature of the problem. Some more links to more information. The handbook itself, the handbook is a wealth of information for things. If you have trouble with the handbook, I really would appreciate hearing from you. Quick note to EMO, something in our Matrix server, Matrix channel. if if you can drop us a note when something in the handbook is not clear. We know that there's a lot of stuff in the handbook that are not worded particularly well, and we would like to try to improve that. An overall overhaul is something we're thinking about, but if we can make individual pieces of it better based on your feedback, we'd like to do that. Anyway, again, there's a number of other links there that are useful, and we'll make sure that these are available in the notes associated with the recording. And with that, I'm done the formal portion, and I will stop my share.